Good morning and welcome to today's Corporate Parenting Board here in Kirklees, Tuesday the 5th of December. Could I welcome everybody? I know at the moment he's not present because it has to be at another meeting, but I'd also particularly like to welcome Joel Hannah as the new Head of Service for Care Leavers and Looked After Children, who is taking on that role in place of Ophelia Ricks. But I'd also like to extend our warm thanks to Ophelia and wish her well in her new role. Elsewhere. So, membership of the board and apologies. So, have we any apologies for absence?
Apologies received from Councillor Ellison and Sarah Miles, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask colleagues to look at the minutes of the previous meeting and to raise any issues if you feel there are any corrections or any issues that we aren't addressing in this meeting? I don't believe there are as such. Are we all happy to accept those as a true copy of the previous meeting? Thank you very much. So, if we could move on to declaration of interest. Let's try and get this in the right order. If anybody has any interest that they need to declare, please use the form in the pack and make sure you hand it in to Jodie before the end of the meeting. This meeting is held in public. There are no items to be in private. Are there any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair.
And we have no members of the public present, so I assume there are no public questions. So we move then to item 7, which is also Joel Hannah, who's at another meeting. And so we're going to reschedule the agenda. Joel will be joining us, but he has to be at this other meeting and will be coming as soon as he can. So we're going to leap around items 7, 8 and 9 for now. And we'll go to what is item 10 next, which is Kirklees Children Looked After and Care Leavers Annual Health Report. This is for the board to consider, and the health report is being provided by Jill Addy, the designated nurse for Looked After Children. So over to you, Jill.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just be providing you with a summary of the Children's Looked After Annual Health Report. Just to bear in mind that this is dated from April 22 to March 23, and it's really important that that is the time frame that we appreciate of the information that's in here. This was post-pandemic when services were returning to normal, but we've been left with some challenges which we were addressing at the time. So I'll just quickly go through some points in the executive summary. So there have been continuing capacity pressures on the team during the year. Alternative working practices such as hybrid telephone and face-to-face model for initial health assessments had remained, with a recognition that assessments involving older children and those needing interpreters were less suited to the telephone aspect, so it extended to face-to-face sessions for those young people. That is still the case at the present time. There had been a significant rise in unaccompanied asylum-seeking children coming into the area, and that impacted on the initial health assessment provision. But despite this, statutory timescales for completion had remained very good. Recognition had been made to the impact on the nursing team, this is a specialist nursing team who are co-located with the local authority, of increasing pressures, for example, the child health complexities, the numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We've got children with risk as a factor moving into area from other authorities. We've got communication requests for support increasing. Number of initial health assessment templates had increased, and they require populating before the clinics, and the electronic administration of System 1 tasks had increased, and partly this is due to the numbers of medical and health teams that actually use System 1 now. It's a very easy method of communicating with each other in a safe way through the child's record. This resulted in us postponing some of the previous preventative work and need to prioritise the activities in front of us. We did include using bank staff to carry out some nursing administrative tasks, example the initial health assessment template preparation and the care leaver health histories. And that's the same currently as well. Dental access improved, and that was supported by the flexible commissioning programme, enabling all children looked after and care leavers in Kirklees to access a service. We do struggle a little bit when children are placed away from Kirklees if that area is not under this flexible commissioning programme. And also if there's large sibling groups, that can be tricky, but in Kirklees it's very positive and remains so. The immunisation rates across all ages have remained excellent, with the usual older age boosters the most common outstanding, but close liaison with health and local authority teams generally lead to a successful outcome, and every month they're followed up. But it's usually the older age, and sometimes they make that decision whether to have those immunisations. The Strength and Difficulties questionnaire return rates used to screen the emotional well-being of children aged 4 to 17 remain stubbornly low, despite efforts to improve compliance. Discussions continue with children's social care to look at alternative methods of distribution. And just to say that that has moved on somewhat now, and I think we'll hear later about how it's expanded the use of the SDQ and how potentially IT is going to be a much better method of distribution. We did have the inclusion of a trauma screening assessment for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, which was run by the local GP. This added a valuable dimension to the support options. That's now ceased. It was a pilot programme and it was really good and did really benefit those young people. She was looking for further monies to support that, but at the present time it's still being evaluated, and I'm sure if further monies came, she may well be able to reintroduce that, but at the moment it's on hold. But at that time, it was a very useful tool to use. The liaison with the sexual health and substance misuse outreach workers has continued, reinforcing a collaborative working model. That remains now. They come to our monthly meetings, and that really helps us to support our young people in the community. I was going to just mention about, Stuart just might want to mention about where things have gone for the ICB in the initial health assessment. Oh, sorry, that'll be for the next section, isn't it? Yeah, apologies. Yeah, Stuart will come in later with where we're going with the IHA aspects. Sorry, I put you on the spot there. So I'll just give you some data, the key points in the data for that year. We did 201 initial health assessments, including 18 requests from other authorities, compared to 146 from the previous year, and we averaged about 94% in the statutory 20-day timescale. And 27 pre-adoption medicals took place. We'd seen a significant rise in the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children entering care. It had been up from 19 the previous year to 30 in that time period, but from earlier years, from 2015 to 21, there was an average of about 80 a year at that point. The medical advisors and paediatricians completed additional medical reports. These were 253 adult medical reports for foster and special guardianship orders. That was up by 17. 102 adult, that was up by 25, and 69 child medical reports for adoption plans, and 19 meetings were held with prospective adopters. For the nursing team, there was 652 review health assessments completed, including 55 for other local authorities. An average of 73% by the exact date in the month was achieved, which was an increase from the COVID times, and Q4 saw a welcome rise to 93% for the under fives. This was partly due to the administrative nursing support that we got, which freed up our specialist nurses. The flexible commissioning we mentioned, so that was supporting the access to dental services. Immunisation rates averaged about 91% across all ages, and teenage boosters for diphtheria, tetanus, polio and meningitis ACWY remain the most common outstanding immunisations as in previous years. And there was an increase in unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, so that saw catch-up schedules being used more widely. They don't have the full remit of immunisations because obviously we don't know what their history is, so they do have a catch-up session. The children's emotional health have benefited from the development of the local authority placement support service, and like I mentioned earlier, 20 unaccompanied asylum seekers benefited from the trauma screening report led by the local GP. There was 130 care leaver health histories written and distributed, and we were able to repeat the health outcome audit from November 2020 to 22, and the highlights of that are in Appendix 2, but there is actually a full report separately for that. And just to note that it's a long-standing, dedicated, experienced health workforce in place here, co-located and linked through technology to support the collaborative working. The action plan that we put forward was about looking at developing an initial health assessment template, especially for our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, because we realised there was questions within our own document that really didn't meet their needs. That's now being developed. We looked at the Kent document and we looked at our West Yorkshire colleagues to see what they were using. We've taken the best bits of everything and put it in ours, and we are trialling it now, but it is looking as a positive move. What we noticed was about the vaping that had increased. We do know that our children in care, actually, they are not big smokers. We do not have high rates of smoking, but we've got high rates of vaping now. And what we started to do about 18 months ago was to start collecting very basic information on the ages of the young people, the gender, what they were vaping, were the nicotine products, and would they have smoked anyway. I will be pulling that together when I get a chance, and that may well feed into some commissioning that may be happening with a service in Kirklees that may be looking at supporting young people with vaping, and our data just may go towards helping them look at what's happening with our young people. Also, we looked at, one of the things that we're looking at were free prescriptions for some of our care leavers, and this is because we have a number of care leavers who are not on benefits because they are working, but when it comes to paying for prescriptions, which are very expensive per item, it can prevent them actually accessing getting that medication that they need. But also opticians and dental support, which also needs paying for. So we have put it to the Integrated Care Board as an idea, because it's come through national communications that this would be a really good idea. It is actually only small numbers, because anybody on benefits doesn't pay for those anyway, but this is for young people who are actually out working. We think that would be a good thing. It's being looked into at the moment. And our business case to remodel our current team is underway, and that's to look at, do we need a dedicated team to do the health assessments, or do we carry on including Thriving Kirklees, who do some of ours at the moment, or is the mixture of the two? That's still ongoing. Very briefly now about the outcome audit, just to explain what this is. So you've got the summary at the back. So what this is, we decided we wanted to know what difference the health team actually make to our children in care. And what we wanted to do was capture what their health was like as they came into care, and then what difference had we made by the time they had their first review health assessment. For children under 5 years old, that would be 6 months later, and for children over 5 years old, it would be a year later. So to allow us to capture all that information, we've had to wait 18 months between each. I have done this before, and this is the second one that we've done now. What I didn't want to lose, because a lot of children actually leave care before their first review health assessment, I didn't want to lose what are the health needs like as they come into care. And what we noticed was that the pandemic, compared to the audit we did before, the pandemic had a significant effect on our children, because they, when, for example, immunisations, they were less up to date when they came into care. Now, immunisations is something that's really normally well attended. The health visitors and GPs in the area focus on this, but we noticed that when they came into care, less children were up to date with their immunisations due to the pandemic, due to being isolated, due to clinics not running, due to GPs just having to focus on certain things, and families perhaps not being urged as much to get to the clinics. We found that 46% of them had no dentist when they came into care. We noticed that children had chronic health issues that were not managed as well as they usually are, and that might be because they've not been taken to appointments, or the clinics have been delayed, or there's a backlog, or we noticed that there was new diagnosis at the IHA, again, a really important factor in the initial health assessment. And what we noticed again in this next one was that young people did not smoke generally, with very low smoking rates. So what happened when we saw them at the review health assessment? So like I said, 6 or 12 months later, there were significant improvements in immunisation compliance. That's one thing we absolutely focus on and make sure with health practitioners and social workers that we follow up when immunisations are not compliant. Also at those next review health assessments, all the 5 years and up were registered with a dentist, so 100%. The under fives, any that weren't up to date was because they were in the process of getting a dentist or they were too young and weren't counted in the figures. There were significant improvements in chronic illness support because we obviously get them straight back into their appointments where they've been missed. We can see on System 1 when things have been missed. There was significant improvements in access to the emotional mental health support. Young people identified as having sexual health support at the time of their IHA no longer needed this. They'd actually been to the clinics, got the support and were being, and they didn't need that any longer. And the number of young people identified with substance misuse at their IHA reduced in that first year. And I'd just like to point to the back of the annual report where there's some really nice feedback from children. It's really hard. Our assessments take over an hour, can be even longer. And young children and older children, they want rid of us by the time we've finished with all this. But actually to get feedback from these children is just lovely. And I just wanted to point out that, you know, it's just complimentary to our nursing team, I think, that they bothered to send those in. It's just a light at the end of our report, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. They are interesting feedbacks at the back of the report, I must admit, made me smile. Have colleagues got any questions or queries for Jill? Councillor Reynolds.
I've got a quick comment regarding the vaping. There's actually a government consultation going on at the moment. It's a little bit quiet, but your views would be really, I think, informed to be able to do that. So if I send you the link.
We met with, just sort to update since we've met with Public Health, we've met with Public Health only last week. She came to our team meeting, one of the representatives from there. She sort of oversees the smoking and vaping, so we're in contact with her as well. But we do know that there's some potential commissioning going on in the area that might also help with that because it's such a big increase. I can't wait to do the audit because I want to see what it looks like. It's just having time to actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Could I ask either you or Stuart to just explain what's meant by flexible commissioning, please?
Shall I do it? So flexible commissioning is it's been around for a little while now, and it's a group of, it's done in West Yorkshire mainly, and it's a group of dental practices throughout West Yorkshire who have agreed to prioritise our vulnerable children. It did really start off as children in care, extended to care leavers, but now I have the understanding that it actually extended to vulnerable children in the community. And what they do is they have got some, they prioritise the children to come into their surgery, but there is just a list of those throughout West Yorkshire. So what we do is we ask the foster carers first of all to go to their own dentist to register, and if not, we give them the list of the flexible commissioning. In that dentist there is a champion, and they know all about this and they focus their work on these vulnerable children. So we should not have any trouble accessing. Now, if there is a problem, they do come to us and we try to intervene and get those children registered. But it's been a really good way of us saying, okay, don't go to that dentist, but try this one because actually, and quote this, and don't get stopped at the front door. Quote this and ask to speak to the practice manager. They know about this. Ask to speak to the champion. And they just come back to us if not. But to be fair, it's worked really well. And the social workers take the list and the PAs take the list of these dentists. I was asked for one, is there any in Wakefield? So I sent them the list of dentists in Wakefield. And they just go down the list and make sure that they get in. They might not get seen immediately, but they are prioritised.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just looking at the Kirklees Fostering Network to ask, have you any feedback from foster carers about the dental issue at all?
I think I'm on, yeah. It's working well. It is working well. We actually used it ourselves for our child who's now moved on, so I may need it again. for the next child. But
And I think we can direct people to, even if they're moved out of the authority, because these days you don't have to go to the dentist that's closest to you or whatever. So if we've got children just over the border that are connected to us, and it's worth travelling in, because many have to travel now for dentists, we suggest that the foster carers still come into a Kirklees dentist, because they are our children at the end of the day and still under our care. And that seems to work as well, because sometimes it's not too far over the border.
Yeah, well, really good to hear from the fostering network that it's working well.
oh, just to add to that, I mean, I'm in Leeds myself, but we did use an Huddersfield dentist.
Yeah. We've
for the
got a
child.
list of Leeds, Wakefield, Calderdale. There aren't many in Calderdale, but there's quite. And I think they do spread slightly further afield as well, but that's the ones that we tend to use, so we keep that list.
It's working.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? I will then. I'm really pleased that there's some work being carried out to look at how health checks and so on are delivered, because I know what a challenge that's been for the last few years for your team. Is there any time scale on that as to when that's due to be resolved?
Sorry, Councillor, we were just we'll be delivering the data for the last month, which we were going to touch, and Stuart was going to perhaps give us a little bit of an update. That's why I nearly brought him in earlier.
Okay.
So when we come to the the performance data, if you want us to bring it in then, or Stuart can do it now, whichever whichever you prefer.
Fine. And my other comment is about free prescriptions for care leavers, which I absolutely and utterly support. And I'm just looking at Kieran or somebody to say, do we know when there's a final decision on that?
I think it's more to do with the ICB, the Integrated Care Board. It's something about that West Yorkshire are taking forward, because it's something that everybody wants to see. So, Stuart, do you have any update on that?
I haven't got anything specific right now in terms of exact dates for that, but I can find out and follow up for you.
Thank you for that, because I do think it's so important. You know, young people are trying to build their lives. They're not necessarily in the highest paid jobs to start off with. And I would hate to think that they didn't get a prescription filled because they couldn't afford to.
It's the opticians as well, isn't it? And,
yeah,
and the dental treatment. It's very expensive.
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely is.
So we want them to actually then progress to get their family to also do these things as well. So it's an education, isn't it? It's not just one young person. It's about how they're then going to promote this to their families going forward.
Yeah. So if there are no more questions, if we can move on, then thank you very much for that, Joe. That was really interesting and useful. And we are jumping about on the agenda, and we're now going to take what would be item 13, the virtual school governing body update, at this point. So, Louise Hallis, over to you.
I think I'll divert first of all to our new chair, Councillor Reynolds. So we have a new chair of a virtual school governing body, Councillor Reynolds. So I'll pass over to Councillor Reynolds first.
It's just a bit of a team effort, I think. Just to let you know that we had a bit of a refresh. We've revisited what support and challenge looks like for the governors and how we want to go forward. The action plan identifies attendance and engagement and attainment, obviously connected to that, but also looking at EHCPs, and we've got some development work going on as well, but I think you'll be able to tell us a little bit more about that. So yeah, it was a really useful meeting. It was well thought out, I think, as well. I think we've got a plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so we went through the head teacher's report that we brought to the previous corporate parenting body meeting, and we did a bit more of a dive into that head teacher's report, looking at the context and data that provided the summary that we brought to the corporate parenting, so that the governors had that ability to challenge and put that challenge in with regards to that. We also looked at some of the commissions that are currently taking place, particularly with regards to some of the areas that we're wanting to really look into. So a key stage 2 deep dive and training for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 to really try and impact on that Key Stage 2 attainment, which has been one of those things that has been quite stubbornly stuck at the moment. So that's one of the areas that we're looking at. And obviously we've also continued to commission the educational psychology service and additional input from the CAMS service as well, so that all our young people have easy access to that CAMS support and the length of time of which they need, rather than the set number of weeks that young people are apportioned from the CAMS service. We did look at the action planning, and as Councillor Reynolds says, we do have a real key focus on attendance, which has a number of different areas. So attendance itself, but it also includes suspensions, exclusions, part-time timetables, young people on a school roll. So they're all really key focus areas for us as a virtual school, alongside the attainment and progress of young people.
Thank you very much for that. Anybody got any questions about the virtual school governing body? No? Thank you very much. Councillor Reynolds and Louise Hallis, thank you. Now then, I think we may have to do this. No, that one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask Nick, are you okay to do the summary annual report on complaints and compliments, or are you waiting for a colleague, or you're happy to do that? So, ladies and gentlemen, just to confuse you all, we're now going to take item 12, summary annual report on complaints and compliments, and could I welcome Nick Libell, who's the service manager children and families, who's going to present this for us. Thank you.
Good morning. Just to present to the board for information the annual summary of the work of the Children's Compliments and Complaints Service for the, just like the previous report, the financial year 22 to 23. So this is an annual summary that must be brought under the Children's Act procedure. The paper relates specifically to those compliments and complaints under the children's social care procedures. So separate to that, as you'll read in the paper, is the corporate complaints process that falls outside the scope of this report. You'll see a brief overview of the numbers of all of the different types of correspondence that were received by the service during that financial year. So a total of 366, but you will see from that breakdown, it's very positive that a large proportion of those are compliments, so 52 of those. You will then see that a great deal, just below half, are enquiries, so they were easily remedied and resolved to the person's satisfaction. A significant chunk thereafter, so 85 of the 366 were issues that were able to be, the technical phrase is local resolution, so that means they were able to be resolved without the statutory complaints process kicking in. Then you will see a breakdown of each of those statutory complaint response stages, 1, 2 and 3, followed by cases at the final end that are referred to the local government ombudsman. So I think in the report it's clear that the service work very hard to work in a restorative manner and to resolve any difficulties or any queries or complaints at the earliest possible opportunity. You will see that there is a priority route for children and young people to make sure that they are at the centre of their enquiry or complaint. The the Compliments and Complaints Service work hand in hand with the Children's Rights Service, so those young people are able to have their queries answered by the right person at the earliest possible opportunity, and hopefully to their satisfaction. You'll see that obviously this report speaks about compliments and complaints across the entirety of the Children and Young People's Directorate. However, we did just highlight a little further into the paper the numbers that relate to the children for whom the local authority is the corporate parent for. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm working to the papers that are set out on the Kirklees website, so I'll just direct to the correct page, which is page 74, which sets out that this is an example of stage 1 complaints. So there's 23 of those in this financial year, 10 of which related to children who are looked after. The report goes on to detail some of the reasons why complainants would raise a complaint. Most commonly, that relates to a delay in a service provision, an issue with communication, or to disagree with a particular decision that's been made. We then just move on to conclude that whilst there's been a small increase in the number of stage 1 complaints, for example, as opposed to previous years, the overall position is that complaints are resolving to the satisfaction of our service users and customers at the earliest possible stage. And I've just laid out in the covering notes the further work we would like to do to across the course of the next financial year, which I think is to make sure that we maximise our recording of compliments. There's a lot of compliments that are received, for example, in an area social work team. It's important to bring those as well as bringing the statistics around complaints, and we want to make sure that the training for the responding managers is rolled out across all of the service areas, so we can make sure that we are still locally resolving the vast majority of our complaints. And what we want to be able to do is keep taking the learning from all of those complaints and weave that into our broader quality assurance work across the directorate to make sure that we are not just responding to the complaints, but we are learning the lessons and weaving those back into the service plans. So I think that is the key points, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Anybody got any questions or comments? Councillor Lawson.
Yep, thanks for that. Just to pick up on the last point there about learning lessons and putting things in place to improve situations. Failure to consult and communicate seems to be present in pretty much all of the complaint stages. How have we translated that into some kind of action that might improve those situations?
So your councillor is correct. That's a very common theme. That will often cross service areas as well. So it will apply to the children looked after services as well as the assessment and intervention services, for example. I think what we encourage via that local resolution is when a complaint is formally received to our service, the local resolution part of it is for the responding manager who may not have been aware at the point of that complaint coming to us, is to pick up the phone, is to go and meet with whether that be a parent or a young person themselves. So the aim is to intervene very quickly, although I accept the point that by the time it comes to the complaint service, the complainant is unhappy to a degree that they feel necessary to contact us. It will feed into lots of wider issues in terms of the amount of cases, for example, that a social worker may hold. It will also depend on things that are sometimes slightly subjective, which is what one person's urgent may be another person's second on the list. So there's something about expectation management, I think, as part of that learning as well.
John.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for the report. I was interested about the compliments. So learning when things have gone wrong, but also when there's been really good practice. I just wondered if there was anything you could add, because it says that the analysis will be in a detailed report, but are there any sort of highlights to pick out? Because I think it's really important as well for our practitioners to know when they've got it right. So thanks, Nick.
Absolutely, and you'll see on a couple of occasions in this annual summary, we didn't want to delay the annual summary any further, but what we do want to add is the detail around those compliments, for example. I'm happy to bring that back to the board at a later date. I think what we see in terms of our compliments is the relationships that a lot of our practitioners have with individual children and young people, and they tell us that they value that relationship very much, that social workers make a difference in terms of pushing their plans on and improving their outcomes, and they advocate on their behalf as well. So that's certainly something that we want to expand upon and to capture better, I think, because it will be far higher than the 52 people that come directly to the complaints service, because people forget that it begins with the compliments and complaints service. So we want to gather it from internally as well, because lots of your staff, Joanne, and will have that feedback given directly to them and their line managers, but people might not think, oh, and we'll pass that over to the compliments and complaints service as well.
I think that's a very accurate thing. I think a lot of compliments will be received that you never hear about, and it would be nice for us to find some way of gathering those together. Can I just comment on your comment about priorities and timeliness and what have you? And I do accept, you know, with a busy workload, that social workers may not prioritise one thing or another, but one of the things that is common when I visit looked after children or care leavers is about key things that they need to happen. For instance, getting a passport so they can go on a school trip, getting permission for a day away from school because they're in some sort of national sporting competition. And young people saying to me, it didn't happen, it didn't come in time, I couldn't go on the trip. There are some things that may seem quite minor to a social worker that are absolutely central and key to our young people. And those sort of, when I get told those sort of things, it really does worry me as such. But I understand, you know, the pressure that social workers may be under.
And I think that's precisely why there is that pathway within the complaints procedure to fast track and prioritise complaints from young people. Because again, you're right, I'd prefer never to hear about that, because that means that that person hasn't felt the need to formally complain and it's already been resolved, hopefully. But where it is, complaints that come in directly from young people or from their advocate on their behalf from the children's rights team are responded to even quicker than all other complaints, which again follow a rapid time scale. So hopefully if that ever does occur, we can capture it very quickly, and that would be the perfect example of a local resolution, because a young person just needs something to happen rather than they're unhappy about something, for example, in terms of their care planning. It's an action and a response that they need very quickly to a timescale that's very important to them.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you're right, and I think where those things happen, if they aren't resolved quickly, I think that starts to make a breakdown in the relationship between the child, young person and the social worker, you know. They can be very unforgiving, can children. I seem to remember that from my own when they were younger. I've just got another question. There were 4 cases that went to the local government ombudsman for children and young people. Do you know what, off the top of your head, what sort of outcome? I ought to know this because I get the list of ombudsman cases every week and I trawl looking for Kirklees. And I've seen some, but I haven't seen 4, I don't think.
I don't have the detail of each of the 4 with me. I've got the more recent ones in my mind, but they will be from this financial year, of course. So tracking back, I'm very happy to furnish you with those. What I see in the more recent ones is that fault is not found in some of those cases, and in others it is, and there is a finding for the local authority to apologise in those circumstances.
Thank you for that. Don't track back on that, but I would welcome your offer at a future meeting for some more detail about compliments, please. So Jodie will be in touch to invite you back again. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? No? Okay. I'll look with excitement to see where we're moving on to now, because I'm still waiting for 2 people to return.
Councillor Kendrick, I received a message from Vicky Metherim to say that herself and Joel Hannah had entered ELT slightly later than anticipated, so maybe returning slightly later than anticipated also, just to help you and Jodie to consider what we might be able to cover.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, well, we're in that case, we'll move to... we could move to... Can you do the Ambition Board update? Is there...
I'd be happy to do so alongside Joanne Sanders, if that's okay, because I wasn't at the last Ambition Board, but I am aware what was covered. So, yes, I'm happy to start with that.
If between the 2 of you.
Yeah. The last Ambition Board was 3 months ago. Actually, the next one's next week, so we're a little bit out of sync with the Corporate Parenting Board. So I don't want to say things that are going to be completely out of date, and I'll maybe hand over to Jo if she wants to provide some more detail. But what we did do in that meeting was to essentially, as well as what we normally do, which is sharing some of our data, performances, strengths and our improvements, we had a focus in terms of our SEND data, our SEND refocus, and indeed the future of the board and the purpose of the board. So from next week, we will be looking to refocus the purpose of that board to have much more of an oversight in terms of the SEND agenda going forward. So that's a bit of a brief update. I'm sorry I wasn't there myself. So Jo, you may want to fill in a little bit more context than I've provided.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Kieran's absolutely right. What was agreed was that because of our priorities around improving outcomes for youngsters with SEND, that the Ambition Board would have a key focus on that moving forwards and keep a watching brief on children's social care improvement and also learning outcomes. We did look specifically around suspensions and exclusions, as well as some of the highlights in performance for social care. And as Kieran rightly said, the next one is next week, so we'll be happy to provide an update at the next Corporate Parenting Board.
Thank you very much for that. Hello, Councillor Smith. You're looking tired. You've been rushing here. Well, on the lead up to Christmas, it gets a little busy. But welcome. No, there's some... refreshments, drinks over there if you need a drink. I'm lost now. Right, we'll move to item 15, updates from board members on interactions with services. So, anyone want to start?
Would you like me to start?
Yes, please.
Because I had a week of launches, not lunches, launches last week. On Wednesday, I was lucky enough to go to the West Yorkshire launch of Project Hope, which is really, it is a project all about hope for our looked after children, for care experienced 16 to 25-year-olds focus. The facilities and the provision gives them support and guidance and coaching and even paid placements when moving towards the world of work, as well as well-being support and some trauma-informed work as well for employers. It was really well attended by employers, social workers, careers, colleges, and there was a real commitment in the room as well to the West Yorkshire young children, young people that are looked after. Alongside that, on Thursday, I went to the Kirklees Top 100 Employer launch. It was the careers part of it launch, which was a question and answer session with a lovely panel of people, developing links and partnership working with local employers and careers and colleges to support all our young children into all our young people into the world of work, and actually employers looking at how they approach young people when they're applying for jobs and things like that. So it's a real lovely interaction there starting in recruitment. There was representation from colleges, universities, schools, and a real commitment to support for our looked after children as well. On the back of that, we have the distinct possibility now. We've been asking this week for a Project Hope launch within Kirklees rather than in Leeds, with some of our local employers as well. There were local employers there, but I think we could make a really big difference here with just getting those people in the same room. And I think that showed on Thursday, when there were those kind of people in the room, that they were really on board with supporting our looked after children going into employment. So it was really quite a productive couple of days.
Thank you very much for that. I think we would all support something like that, and let's hope the next steps will be we can look to put something like that, particularly in Kirklees, to connect with local organisations and employers. Anyone else got anything to say in terms of interactions? Well, I'll do some then. I went to the Kinship Carers Halloween party, wearing my new witch's hat, which I bought on purpose. It was much admired. I went to a really interesting care leaving team meeting in Dewsbury. Joel Hanna was there and Vicky Methering was, and it was a really interesting team meeting, and I can see such changes within that team, you know, so it was really pleasing to see. I also went to a time to talk session. These are where it was Kieran, Vicky and I. Kieran seems to have dropped out. And Vicky Metheringham and I go to these sessions, went to see the teams in Slowett, children with disability and looked after children teams there. Really positive and interesting to hear what the issues are for them and what we can do about it. I also been to 2 full staff engagement sessions, one in Huddersfield and one in Dewsbury. And at that, Tom Brailsford talked about the financial situation and the impact potentially on children's services. And it was surprisingly well received, with people saying thank you for being open and honest with us, but also people coming up with suggestions about how we could do things better value for money, you know, which I found really positive. It was a positive. Both meetings were very positive, though different. And then last week I joined an online session about Magic Breakfast, which I'd vaguely heard about, but really hadn't engaged with before. And this is where a charitable organisation organises breakfast provisions every school day for schools who take part in it, so they can either provide in-classroom breakfast or preschool breakfast or pick up food in the playground, which is open to families with younger children who perhaps aren't at that school. There is a financial charge with it, not huge for a year's continued breakfast, but it is something I'm wanting to explore in Kirklees. We think there may be some schools already part of Magic Breakfast in Kirklees, but we're not sure. But I do think, particularly as families are facing such challenges about feeding their families, and children struggle to learn if they go to school hungry, they're tired, they can't concentrate. And the outcomes for those, some schools have been doing it for 6 or 7 years, and the outcomes they report are phenomenal. The difference it's made to children's development and learning. And I think it is something that we need to be looking at, and I'll be pursuing that. I don't think I've got any further updates. I've probably forgotten some things, but that's as much. Anybody else with any other comments as such? Go on, Joanne.
Yeah, just one, Councillor Kendrick. It was really great to go to Woodley School and College last Monday. Many of their pupils have been working with our voice team about inputting and what they would like to see in their brand new school as it's being built. And so there'd been several sessions, but each youngster had participated in about 5 or 6. And this was to say thank you. So they got some goodies, and also they got some feedback as to what had been fed back into the architect's brief. I think I've got that technically right. But it was really, really good to listen to those youngsters. And yeah, I did pass on some things to my colleague who's leading that programme about the types of trampolines. That's really important, so they're not waterlogged. And just in terms of the outdoors being just as important as the indoors. So it was a real privilege to go out and meet those students, and yeah, much more of that to come. So yeah, thanks, Chair.
That's really good to hear about young people having a say in what their school looks like as such. So, you know, thank you for that. Councillor Reynolds.
I've forgotten the other thing that we did. We went to the foster carers celebration, Christmas celebration, which was really well attended. It was a lot of fun. Superb singer, although rather loud. But it was wonderful to sit on tables with foster carers and talk about some of their experiences and football and other things as well. But it was a really good evening. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you for that. Yes, it was, although I was shocked at Keith's outfit for the evening. He looked far too smart for the Keith that I know and love. Kieran.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. It was a very modest outfit, Keith, on the evening, and I just reiterate, I thought it was a fantastic celebration, and I was privileged to be sat on a table with some, what to use their words, brand new carers, and also some carers that had been caring for 12 years, to hear some of the challenges but opportunities. We really listened at that event. I know that you also did, the other officers there did. We've taken that information away, and as you mentioned, we had engagement events in Dewsbury and in Huddersfield too that myself and Joe also co-led alongside Tom. We've retained all that feedback. Staff and carers have given us some fantastic ideas, some very deliverable ideas that we're not just losing sight of. We'll be compiling them, and they'll be supporting us with our plans going forward. So really productive, and thank you for those that attended.
Thank you for that. Now then, ever go back to that one? Yes. So I'm just wondering, I know Joel's only just sat down, but welcome back, you and Vicky. At item 7, we've got service acknowledgements and awards, and it's got you down to give a verbal update, is that right?
Yeah, I think I can give a verbal update. It's really to acknowledge that Kirklees we had 3 social workers put forward for Social Worker of the Year awards, for the national awards, and we achieved, or I say we achieved, but I made and on behalf of Kirklees, was voted to be the Social Worker of the Year. So Kirklees holds that position, and we're really proud that one of our social workers has achieved that award. I wanted to obviously note that councillors here.
Yeah, so the social worker also got overall social worker of the year as well, so he outshone every other finalist at the awards ceremony, which is just a fantastic achievement for Kirklees. Everybody's very interested in that particular social worker, and one of the things we're trying to do is maintain that all of our practitioners are just as valued by us all. So we're making sure that we're celebrating with them on a regular basis their quality too. But it has put Kirklees out there nationally. People are interested. Children's Commissioners now asked if they can come and see Kirklees and have a look at what we're doing. So there's lots of positives that also I think we'll benefit from as a result of that celebration. And we intend to do it all again next year, Ian.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really wonderful that I won the overall award, but to have 3 of our practitioners nominated and there at that ceremony is really quite fantastic, you know, so I'm really, really pleased about that. Thank you for that. Just to keep you on your toes, item 7 says service updates. It says we will receive a verbal update from you.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether there were some slides sent out as well within the papers for this service update. But if not, I suppose the service update. Yeah, the service updates relate to some changes in heads of service portfolio structures. So previously, I was the head of service responsible for sufficiency for children's residential services and fostering. As Ophelia Ricks, who's been our head of service for corporate parenting for the past five or 6 years in Kirklees, leaves to take up a new position, I'm moving over to become responsible for corporate parenting, and that means the social work teams that provide support for our children looked after. Our care leaving service, I'll retain responsibility for our children's residential estate and the work that we're doing there to improve and expand that residential estate. And Anna Gladhill will assume responsibility as head of service for our fostering and sufficiency agendas. I think that
can I just interject just to say the slides as such are in the pack from page 11 onwards if anybody hasn't found them. Sorry, Joel.
Yeah, so there's slides there to just set out lead officers from head of service for each area of responsibility.
I have to say, in your absence, I did welcome you in your new role and thanked Ophelia Ricks for her work, but again, welcome into your new role, Joel. Thank you. We'll try to move to what was originally item 9, the Children's Performance Highlight Report. I don't know if you or Vicky are going to... Oh, Vicky isn't in the room at the moment.
Yeah, Vicky's not in the room at the moment, so I mean, I can share some detail on the highlight report as we go through it, assuming that people have had sight of the papers. You'll note that we've got the children in care that are placed outside of the local authority boundary is indicated there at, for October 11.6. I just wanted to make the point in terms of some of the detail that isn't provided alongside this this data, and I'll make an effort to provide it in future, will be a bit more of a breakdown around where those young people actually are. Because there's often a negative inference drawn that we've got young people placed at distance from the local authority. And though that is sometimes the case, actually some of those young people will be living with family members in kinship and connected care arrangements in other parts of the country because that's the right plan for them. So actually I think we could, it would warrant further breakdown of the detail so that we can explore that more. And that links into the next performance around stability and placements of children. That's where our children are living. And actually where you can see that there's the difference is that there's more stability longer on within a child's experience of being looked after. And that is because where it's not right, we will continue to make efforts to bring those young people back to the local authority. The other thing to say where we don't have those arrangements in place because it is the desired position for the young person, it's forced there through the very challenging environment of finding the right place for a child to live. So our efforts of our placements team is to support young people to live in a home that's matched and able to support and raise them. And sometimes that's very difficult to do locally.
Thank you for that. We've just moved on to Agenda 9, Vicky, Corporate Parenting Board Highlight Report. Joe's just raised that. Are there any issues you want to raise in the papers?
I don't think so, no.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board on the information that we have?
Thank you, Chair. It's probably something I've asked before, but the thing that stands out to me massively, really, on page 17 is the children in care, the percentage. So the 64.1% are hovering around 60% or thereabouts for most of the last quarter. In comparison to England, it's a little bit down, but when you look at statistical neighbours, it's significantly less. I'm just wondering what the reason you see that being, really. I'm not sure whether it's a good or a bad thing.
I take that just in terms of that that rate per for the rate that's indicated there being lower than other local authorities. You're right to question whether it's a good or a bad thing. The assurances that we get are the systems that we have for assessment and our work with children in need to divert them from needing more intensive care. So actually, I think it's an indicator of the efforts that are made in early help and family support that we provide. That means that we support families that might otherwise have children being received into care through earlier intervention. Obviously, that's tested in a number of ways: referral rates to children in need services, and the arrangements and support that's offered through early help services. It's pretty consistent, that rate, and there are other local authorities that are outliers. So within Sheffield, as a core city, has a pretty consistent, similar low rate, and again on test. That's been because of their local offer, retaining preventative and supportive services at early level.
I think as well, add to that, and it is about the early help and intervention offer that we make. As much as anything, it is because we have a high number of special guardianship arrangements and kinship carers, more than other authorities do. If you added the two numbers together, you come out very close to the same number as statistical neighbours or geographic neighbours. I mean, I'm confident that it's the right, it's a good thing, to answer your question.
Yeah, we also have, all local authorities work towards what's called the public law outline. So we, although children don't necessarily come into care, we are working with 37 children at the moment in a pre-proceedings process. So we do work with families to try to avoid having to go into care proceedings with children and avoid children having to become looked after. So should you add those children to that, that would also increase the numbers. I certainly wouldn't want to see that number increasing. I really don't. We really do oversee children's cases to try to avoid that. And sometimes, in my view, children are coming into care that we would like them not to have to do so. So I'm really comfortable with that number. If it could be lower, I'd be pleased about that. There are other authorities where the number is much lower. Of course, where we are with neighbouring authorities and stat neighbours, you can see that we are doing much better. But a lot of that's due to the features of the West Yorkshire towns.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on this part? Can we move on to the health part of, sorry, the education part of the data, please? Louise.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. It's Louise Hallis, head of virtual school. We remain quite static with our figures, so we've had 100% PEP completion since the pandemic. We moved to virtual meetings, which has helped enable us to do that, and the hard work of the virtual school team who ensure that all the young people have a personal educational planning meeting each term. Initial PEPs, you'll see that we've at the end of October, we'd already had 63 initial PEPs. 60 of those took place within 10 working days. The 3 that didn't were done within 20 school days. But just to note, that's quite a high figure at this time of year, of the academic year, to have had new into care and have those initial PEPs. Just to say, attendance is stubbornly static, and as I said earlier, that's one of the areas in the action plan when we mentioned the governing body, and we debated at the governing body whether that was positive or negative, because we've seen nationally that attendance is lower, however, and suspensions are higher, whereas we've stayed quite static, which seems to be good, but at the moment we don't have that comparative data to know where we are in comparison to other local authorities for our children looked after. School moves are always expected behind September, as we always do. September and January seem to be a real time when we have those school moves, but that is that planned school move in order to ensure that a young person is well supported into their new school place, and it's a positive transition for them, and that the support can be put in place. One of the things that I should have probably mentioned earlier is that Kirklees College have achieved the Attachment Research Community Alex Timpson Award for attachment and trauma. So that was just the other week. They were at the Attachment and Research Community annual conference where they were announced winners nationally for their work around attachment and trauma.
Thank you for that. Another achievement and award to celebrate. Excellent. Any questions on the education outcomes part of this? I had noted the mid-year school move and the September figures high. In general, would you say those are all planned moves as such?
We wouldn't say all of them are planned, but actually the majority of them are ones where maybe there's been a placement move and therefore a new school place needs to be done, but it needs to be done in a positive way so that they have positive endings with their previous school, so that when they start a new school in their new area, they've had that positive ending from their previous school.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions as such. Can we move on to the health part then of the report? I know we've had a very detailed report on the previous year, but this is current data, isn't it, Jill?
Yes, yes. So Jill Addy, designated nurse for looked after children. This is the October 23 data. And as usual, I tend to bring two aspects, the local authority rolling data and the Locala data, which is based on the review health assessments and initial health assessments that have been done in the last month. So the document that you can see shows that 40.5% were completed in statutory timescales. These are the initial health assessments. This is tried to be done within 20 days of a child coming into care. This is gathering information from last year when the data was much higher. So the actual current percentage is 0 in the 20-day timescales. There's been a number of challenges, and this is replicated across West Yorkshire. I'll come to Stuart in a moment to just give an explanation as to kind of what's happening across the West Yorkshire patch. But prior to this, we were on about 95%, but there's several factors that have been impacting on us. And although the data shows that there's relative stability with children who are in care month on month, what we're finding in health is the numbers of children that come into care and then leave care quite quickly and go to special guardianship orders, for example, which is really good news. But the work for us as a health team is at the front end at the moment, and it's so the numbers that are actually coming in and requiring an initial health assessment, and some of that is to do with the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that come in and then quite quickly turn 18 before their next review health assessment. We've had some sibling groups come in, we've got increased complexities, and we've had a number of older young people coming in who were unable to engage in the process, which is coming into a paediatric clinic and seeing a paediatrician, etc. They're a bit older, making those decisions, and we have to try and look at alternative options for how we can engage them. And it might be that they're involved in maybe the Youth Justice Service, and we can get one of our other specialist nurses in that area to actually do the assessment for us and with the paediatrician, but that takes time and just adds to those extra resources that are needed. The new time frame for initial health assessments is the end of January at the moment. We have a planned booked waiting list, which is nothing new to other authorities either, but it is something that we've never seen before this year. When I wrote this a couple of weeks ago, we had 32 virtual telephone assessments planned and 38 face-to-face in Acre Mills Clinic planned. And there were 29 IHA timescale breaches related to the clinic availability and capacity. This is all recorded, and we do know why these things happen, and it is being looked at the moment. And the business case, I mentioned it earlier about to look at our model is being looked at with the commissioners, and this is not just a Kirklees issue, so I'll just ask Stuart to cover the next section.
Thank you, Jill. I'm Stuart Horn. I'm Head of Children's Commissioning on behalf of Kirklees ICB and Kirklees Council. We've mentioned at this board a couple of times in the past the challenges facing the Looked After Children's Health Service and some of the progress we've been trying to make to resolve that. It does feel in the last month that we have shifted quite some way on this, that we've been meeting frequently with ourselves and with Locala and with Caldale and Huddersfield Trust to look at creative ways of how we can improve the service within the resource envelope that we have, and if we can bring any resource in from elsewhere. Also, as Jill says, we're not alone in this. We've been doing benchmarking across West Yorkshire and find that our colleagues are facing the same issues, and to the point that the Looked After Children's Health Assessments are on the West Yorkshire ICB risk register, and so they're picked up at quite a high level there. Part of the cooperation across West Yorkshire has seen some change in working patterns, so where we have seen a lot of cross-boundary working and other areas having to carry out health assessments for children who are responsibility of another area. We've seen a reduction in that flow recently due to the conversations that we've had. So some of the other work that is ongoing, and we discussed at the recent Health and Care Partnership Leadership team, is around how we can prioritise some of the clinicians that we have. So we looked at some of the services being delivered, particularly by the paediatricians who do the initial health assessments. That's resulted in us looking at moving some services from underneath the paediatricians into a nurse-led service to free up capacity to increase the number of IHAs that can be carried out. We're working on a timescale of having this in place by 1st of April next year. The other thing that we've managed to do is secure a commitment for some additional resource from ICB and from the local authority to bolster Jill's looked after children health service team to carry out the the review health assessments within that team and cut out the reliance on the 0 to 19 practitioner team. It was important to do that for not only for the performance of this service and for the children in this service, but also to resolve the issues facing the 0 to 19 service too, to simplify that. Some of the other ideas we had, Jill referred to some of the issues around unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, the challenges that poses. As Jill mentioned, the children are often very close to being adults, and they often come up with other needs, such as language needs and so on. So what we are exploring is whether other more specialist services who work closely with asylum-seeking adults might be better placed to take on the review, the initial health assessments for this cohort of young people, given that they have the skills, they have the access to services, and also it's highly likely that the children will be registered with them as a GP and will transition to adulthood there. So it seems to make sense to reduce that, to remove the need for that transition period. As I said, the detail is yet to be worked out, but that's what we're moving towards.
Thank you for that. That sounds sensible. Can I just ask, when you talked about nurse-led paediatrics, are we talking about someone separate or someone from Jill's team?
No, it's a different nursing team. It's a different service that's not related to looked after children, but it's something that the paediatricians currently do, which could be done by a nurse-led service.
Would you like me to just nip on with the review health
continue
assessment?
On, please,
Actually, this data isn't too far out. The rolling data is 82.2 and 87.4 for the under and over 5-year-old review health assessments. And in Locala for the October data, it's 86 and 93. This is working relatively well, but it's a bit of a tenuous situation at the moment, but it's working well in the fact that my small team of specialist nurses are doing the usual children that they do, and the 0 to 19 nurses are covering the ones that they generally do as well. However, they have been using a bank nurse who actually was the retired nurse from my team, so she's really brilliant. And she's doing quite a number of the review health assessments for 0 to 19 for our service, so we know that they're going to be brilliant anyway. So it's working out relatively well with the review health assessments, but the sooner that this model gets finalised, the better, because then I can have overall sight of what's happening. Dental checks attended. There's actually a working group, as we mentioned last time, looking at aligning the data and looking at how it's collected, because at the moment it relies on our review health assessments, as you know, and we see those children and young people 6 monthly or annually, and that's not really giving a positive picture. There's other ways that we could collect the dental data, and that is being looked at the moment. Just for these purposes, the October data shows that 100% of the children aged 18 months to 5 years had attended, and 94% of the 5 years plus had attended. The ones that have not attended, sometimes it's because they're placed out of Kirklees and they're trying to register with the dentist. Sometimes it's that those young people choose not to go, and that's about us encouraging them to go. But still, it's a very small number that. Registered with the dentist, 100% of the 18 months to 5 years, and 70% again for the 5 years and above. This is at the point of their RHA that they were registered. We talked about flexible commissioning before, so I don't need to go on about that. The substance misuse data, we've said that the working group is also looking at alternative ways of collecting this, because this is done on the review health assessment. That figure is 5, but at the moment it's now 4, and that's because as soon as they're 18 they come off that list. But we're looking at different ways of collecting that. And the immunisation rate, 100% and 86% for the under and over 5-year-olds. We're up to date with their immunisations. Reasons for lower uptake in older children can be because of the shortened schedule for the unaccompanied. They can only have them so often. They have an unknown history, and some people may decline to have that, some of the older ones. We do know which immunisations are missing, and I follow those up every month. I get a list of which are outstanding and follow that up with the social workers, and it's usually quite a positive outcome. So the outstanding immunisations, we've got the HPV, that was just 2. We've got school leavers booster, which I mentioned earlier, and the men ACWI, just 2. Preschool booster and second MMR, there's just 1 there. And these are all followed up. So again, the working group could look at accessing this data directly from Locala. It is a moving picture, is the immunisations, because children go at different stages to have it. Sometimes they have it done in school, they may not be in school, so then they've got to go to the GP and have it, or the immunisation team. So it's a moving programme, and it could do to be collected in a different way. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Or happy with that? Councillor Smith.
Thanks. So I think my question is about the initial health assessments within the 20 days. Now, you've alluded to some of the issues with the collection of the data, and I think in some ways these are quite crude measurements, so I'm not overly worried, but there's a quite marked decline, isn't there, in the last 12 months. But I suppose reassurance would be, if out of the ones that were missing the 20 days, are they just missing it by a couple of days, or are they missing them for weeks on end? And it's a sort of trajectory. It looks to be going worse over time. So I'm just worrying whether, you know, it's a compound effect. If you can say that, you know, they're only missing them by a handful of days. And the other thing as well is, I suppose it depends what the initial health assessment finds, doesn't it? So the other stuff around there is relatively positive. You know, even the substance misuse is fairly low. So I suppose, does the fact that it's missing 20 days really matter? If it's just going up to 22, 23, and also, you know, what are they finding in the health assessments? Are they finding like significant things to worry about or not?
I'll just explain the process, sorry. The process is in a hybrid system, really. So the children there's a telephone assessment, which is very quick, and that is done, because we can't have so many people in the clinic nowadays since COVID. So the telephone assessment is done quite quick and popped in the schedule, and that includes the social worker, the carer, the young person, the child, the interpreter, everybody on a Teams call. We've already done a lot of work, the administration, of what those child's health needs are based on the history. That's why we have the bank worker actually doing that. The template is prepared, then the doctors, the paediatricians have this first call with everyone. If there is anything that comes out of that, most of the assessment is done there, really. And then the bit where they come into clinic is the bit where the doctor would check them over physically, and we do the height and weight. But most of the assessment is already done. We cannot call it complete until both those bits are done. So they are very likely being seen much earlier than that, but we can't complete it until they've been seen by the paediatrician face to face. So we already know what issues there are quite early on, and they would be addressed. And I don't know if you were in here when I did the earlier bit about the annual report. I don't know if you were in here when I did the earlier annual report. But the outcome audit that I did shows you the difference that our team do make. So we feel quite confident we are not missing things. It just has to be done in 2 parts, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that still remains.
Okay, fair enough, thanks. I mean, that point, though, about the pandemic, I'm a bit worried, really, if we're still using that as an excuse for not bringing clinics through properly.
Well,
you know, we've finished, haven't we, with that, to be honest. We shouldn't be talking about COVID and stuff now, should we, with respect to packing clinics out, in my view.
We still use the clinics at the hospital, so we have to abide by their rules, and it's only very recently that the masks were back on wearing them in clinic, because whenever there's something coming through, they have to protect the most vulnerable. So I hoped, and we all hoped, we stopped wearing masks in clinic, but I'm afraid they were reintroduced recently because of spread of infection and that reduction and protection for staff. So when we're in the clinic, we have to abide by those rules. So it might not be about the COVID pandemic. It just might be that there's more infections around that's affecting staff and vulnerable children. So we do abide by that. That's why we've kept the hybrid system, and we don't need everybody back in the clinic later. But the pandemic did have an effect, because it's meant that there's still that limitation on how many people you can have in a clinic. at any one time, because there's not only us there, there's a whole paediatric clinic going on. We just have a couple of those rooms.
I think what she's saying is it's really what the hospital requires. Say it again.
That's why I'm saying nothing else.
Thank you. Anything else you need to add, Joe? No. Any other questions? No? Children looked after convictions. Do you want to just highlight any key bits, please?
I will do, thank you. Yes, so I'm Ian Mottershaw, Head of Service for Youth Engagement. Children looked after with convictions. Happy to report that we are speaking about a very, very low cohort here. We are well below the English and the Stat Neighbours benchmarking averages, and we're significantly lower than what we were 12 months ago. I've done a little bit of exploring into why that is, and I think fundamentally where we're at is we have at Kirklees developed a much more inclusive out-of-court disposal panel. The panel itself is offering a great deal more perspective, and beyond looking at what historically was simply gravity scores against offending on crime type, we are bringing the circumstances, the life experiences of all the young people discussed into the fore. So the young people are being recognised for their circumstances, for their situations, for their life experiences, and more imaginative ways of restoration and rehabilitation to prevent that reoffending is coming through, rather than historically the punishment that a conviction would present. So I'm happy to go into further detail and take questions. As I say, we're talking about a very small cohort here, and I'm happy to report that.
Yeah, it is very pleasing as such. Anybody got any comments or questions? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, and it's very encouraging to see such small numbers and those, I think, what adverse child experiences being brought to the fore and being used in those assessments. Can I ask about the element of restorative practice in that, and how that plays out in those assessments, and how it's included in that?
Oh, sorry, who's included?
Sorry?
I didn't hear the last part. How?
Sorry, how the idea of a restorative practice is included in those panels?
Yeah, because once you understand the circumstances and carry out that assessment, you understand then what are the drivers that may bring on further or reoffending. And in all cases, the objective is to make sure that further reoffending does not occur. So it's more an holistic approach to all the circumstances and the situation, and then devising some bespoke package to work with that young person, targeting at those things. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it's all about understanding the circumstances, the drivers, and then working with that person, whether that be some restorative work to understand the consequences and the impact of offending, or whether it's something more around support that enables them not to want to reoffend. But in reality, when we're talking about children looked after, there are circumstances where our young people in our own homes, we would not be calling the police. We would not be expecting the police then to take them and then have them punished with a conviction. And we should be treating those young people who are in our homes in exactly the same way. We shouldn't be over-criminalising people for the circumstances of where they live.
Thanks. I'm just very encouraged to hear that that's part and parcel of what we're doing. It's well known that criminalisation follows a child, a young adult, into adulthood, and then through the rest of their lives, and adversely impacts on their life opportunities. So to have that happening now here is really good news. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think what is happening is showing some really good outcomes, you know, and it shouldn't be one size fits all, you know. It is about particular circumstances. Councillor Reynolds, he wanted to come in.
Yeah, to add to that comment, I mean, it's fantastic to see the trauma-informed approach actually having proper results, and you can see the impact that's going to have on our young people's lives as they get older. So it's, yeah, really good news. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, yeah. I'm going to be brief, but I just agree with what's just been said over the last few minutes. I think that I went to see the youth offending team a couple of years ago, and what was clear was that there was a difference between how I, as a dad, might treat my own kid. If he did something daft, you know, if he broke my window, I'm not going to ring the police. You know, you've just mentioned it. You know, if a children's home reacts in the same way, then it's positive, and I think these figures bear that out, and it's good to see, because we're not going to get anywhere if as soon as a child puts a foot wrong, they get the police knocking, and so I think it's a really positive thing.
Excellent. I think you're nearly doing yourself out of business. Or perhaps not.
Perhaps not.
Thank you very much for that. Is someone going to highlight anything to do with care leave? Is there any key things to highlight there?
Yep, hi. Joel Hannah, Head of Service for Corporate Parenting. I think one of the things that I'd just like to highlight specifically is board members will note the performance in relation to education, training and employment. And although actually we hold quite a strong position nationally and against stat neighbours, it really isn't accepted as good enough, that performance, and we know that is a challenge for the service. We're working with partners, but including ourselves in the council. So very recently, we've been having some cross-departmental conversations around work placements, testers, opportunities for young people to experience work across the different directorates that we have in the council, and that's bearing some very early fruit on a case-by-case basis. It's something that we're looking to widen out for apprenticeships with partners as well. We work with Calderdale and Kirklees Careers Service, which is a TECL organisation between Kirklees and Calderdale, and through them are able to access opportunities for things that the local authorities directly couldn't access. So we're hoping to engage a third sector organisation through grant funding to provide some mentoring for young people as well who have approached us. So we've got those opportunities. So I just really wanted to highlight that performance is noted, and it's probably the biggest protective factor for any of our care leavers, and as it is with children in care, education, training and employment is a real protective factor against a multitude of things, including the work that Ian's just highlighted around offending. So that's a specific effort. The other performance I'd like to note is we've got 100% you'll see in relation to the allocation of care experienced young people, children at 17 years and 4 months. We are aiming and aspirant to get that even lower so that we can do introductory work and have a crossover from a social work service to a personal advisor service. One of the things that we know that we've got to do in order to achieve that is again engage wider partners in supporting our care experienced young people, because caseloads can be very, very high, and that's okay if you've got the right skill set and the right people delivering the right services. But if you are providing every bit of element of support, whether that's a PIP filling in PIP assessment paperwork, supporting young people to appointments, registering them with GPs, etc., then it's pretty exhaustive. So giving service is really keen to engage wider partners in our hubs, and so that young people can access that support directly. Those are the two things that I wanted to know, and obviously any questions.
Any questions or comments? Can I just make a comment or a question, if you like? And it is that, you know, at 18, most of our care leavers are looking to live independently, and it's about what can be done so that there's that earlier commitment to, you know, finding suitable accommodation. You know, I know our housing service gives priority, but really doing it just a few months before they're about to leave care is just not soon enough. And what works is or can be done about that.
Yeah, a part of the reason why I was late in coming to this meeting is because I was in another meeting discussing this amongst other things, this very issue with our colleagues in our housing directorate. So probably the single biggest protective factor for young adults and is somewhere stable and safe to live. So it goes hand in hand with them supporting them into education, training and employment. We are working with our housing colleagues to review the way that we provide those offers at the moment. So we've just increased the time that young people can be referred prior to their 18th birthday for their Band A status, which is the agreement that we've got. So they are prioritised as our children, corporately parented young adults. So we think actually we need to go further than that, and the offer needs to be extended, and we need to look at how we support and achieve that. And we know that that's not all going to be possible within the council's own housing stock. So we have some work to do to improve and better the access to the private rented market, and people be aware that there is a huge pressure nationally and of course locally in relation to finding affordable and suitable accommodation for young people, specifically in terms of their entitlements and to access support for that. But that's the effort of the service. The other barrier and consistent work that we need to do is to ensure that by the time that our young people are leaving to move into independence, and I say that a bit reservedly because it's really, they continue to be interdependent on our support and on their own systems of support. The average age for young people leaving their family homes in normal contexts is significantly older than 18. You know, I've got a 23-year-old that I can't get out the door, so you know, and people will have experienced that. So it's a consistent challenge that our young people uniquely have because of the way that they are cared for in state care, and it's one that we constantly try to mitigate. One of the ways that we're working to mitigate that is by making sure that the people that are providing care, so our foster carers and our children's residential homes and those that we provide and commission alike, are supported to be delivering proper independent support arrangements. At the moment, we know in the care leaving service that isn't good enough. We have a very short programme of independent support, and we expect a young person to engage in a half-day programme and then be independent. And we need to do better than that, we know. So we are working with our accommodation providers to get young people ready for what can often feel like a cliff edge for young people.
Thank you for that. Anybody else got any more questions or comments, care leavers? No? Are there any things we need to highlight around adoption and or fostering? No? We're happy with that? Thank you very much. I think we are at the end of the performance report in that case. And we'll go back to updates on the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. Joel.
Yep, I can speak to this report. So for anyone that's not had full sight of the report, it outlines their national assessment framework that local authorities with children looked after undertake. It sets out that there is a statutory requirement for our carers to provide what's called a strength, it's often abbreviated to an SDQ, but it's a strengths and difficulties questionnaire. And the idea of the questionnaire is that you can do a moment in time and then go back to it and do the same questions reviewed and see distance travelled. The way that questionnaire is framed is to consider the young person's emotional well-being and need for support, and then there's a gradients of scoring that will indicate whether there are causes for concern if you score high. So there's an example in the appendix of a questionnaire, so I won't go through the types of questions. We have some work to do in terms of completion rates, so we're 65% completion rates for the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, and really we need to make sure that we're getting closer to, if not 100% of these completed. There will always be some difficulties in full completion because we've got, I think as Jill earlier referred to, some young people may be coming in or moving in placements, and they're very difficult to track down and undertake. And also young people being assessed after they've just moved into a new fostering arrangement may be very dysregulated and you know unsettled. So there's some work to do around when we're providing it and making sure that it's provided accurately and then reflected back by the carers. But we're working with our foster carers, we're working with our, and when I say our foster carers, our own, but also where we've got children placed in independent fostering and our children's homes to ensure that we get the carer element completed to a better rate. We have just seen in this year a slight increase up from last, but in terms of completions, which is positive, however still not good enough, we know. But also alongside that, we've also seen that the causes for concerns, the highest scoring questionnaires has also increased. I have a conversation arranged later this month with our designated doctor and Jill to discuss, amongst other things, our responses to those questionnaires. And the only other thing to say there is that we've also got our emotional health and wellbeing service is now embedded within our placements team and our fostering service, working alongside each other. So we're better placed to be able to quickly respond to where we've had an indication that there are causes of concern and distress being displayed by young people, so that we can get support into the carers quicker. I can take any questions on the report.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Lawson.
Just really a quick question is, this strength and difficulties questionnaire seems to be a bit of a snapshot, that once it's filled out, there's no scope then for actually what happens next after that. And I'll just be interested to see how we're thinking about overcoming that and making it more of an ongoing process, if you like, to make it meaningful.
Thank you. That was one of the purposes of wanting to revamp our approach to how we do strengths and difficulties questionnaires, because we were conscious that it didn't matter what the score was, there didn't seem to be an end product as a result of that rise in score. And those are the key kind of drivers to why we wanted to bring strengths and difficulties questionnaire back into kind of our scope, so that our social workers are supporting the foster carers to complete those questionnaires, so that we can both support the foster carer but also better support young people's emotional well-being when that score rises. You know, we need to understand what our average is in Kirklees and what we're doing about that. So that those were the main drivers for wanting to get hold of this. And I note from the report that by March 24 this process will then be embedded properly. So that's great progress, I think.
Kieran.
Just to add to what Vicky was saying, I think, and also to what Joel had alluded to in relation to the emotional wellbeing service. The score is only an indicator, as you've suggested, but it is also a very useful trigger to suggest that the right questions need to be asked to support formulation, to understand getting access to the right support at the right time. So we're now in a position, because we've aligned services correctly, where that can be much more of a natural process rather than needing to be referred on to another service. So it's it's all part of the same process now, and we've already integrated them services.
And I think if you look at Appendix 2, we need to make sure that our workers understand the barriers and blockages to SDQs, because there's the learning for us. You know, it's really important that we talk to our foster carers about the importance of an SDQ and what does that actually mean. It's a really helpful exercise that Nushin's pulled together.
Thank you for that. Can I just ask, is this form a national standard form, is it?
Yeah, it was introduced many years ago by someone called Bentavim, I think, wasn't it? But yeah, the national tool that's used for children that are aged between 4 and 16. We can go further, and I think we should, because some authorities don't just use this for looked after children. They use it for children that are on a child protection plan. They use it in all parts of the services, just so that we've got a support and approach when young people are experiencing some difficulties. But yeah, that is a national toolkit.
Thank you for that. I can quite appreciate, and it'll be interesting to see the outcome of trialling a digital version, because, you know, I filled in something last month on a form, got it in the envelope, prepaid, and it's still in my handbag, and it should have been back by the 2nd of November, you know. So I absolutely understand how they don't get posted for a start off. You have a busy life sometime. It's the last, if you can find a post box when you want one, you're lucky. Okay, thank you very much for that. I think now we come to item 16, Corporate Parenting Board Next Steps, which is Joel and Vicky as a double act according to this, but I think it's quite an important subject. I know we've all had to concentrate for a long time, but I think this is absolutely key that we deal with this one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just in terms of, I alluded to the meeting that Vicky and I had to step out of. This board in order to attend was with our chief executive. And we were discussing a recent review that we had from a national government advisor, Mark Riddell, who's the national government advisor on care experience and works to the Department for Education in that. And he came to review our care leaving services with us at our request, not because we've been identified as needing that, but at our request at this time when we're moving portfolios around as well. And one of the areas that he identified was that we might seek to strengthen our corporate parenting arrangements by broadening the panels or the board rather, and revising and reviewing perhaps some of the attendees at the board to include, and we alluded to this in a previous conversation, colleagues from probation might have something to offer, police representation at the board. They're regarded as Section 11 corporate parents or responsible organisations. And to ensure that we've got the capacity on this board to not just scrutinise performance of children's services, but actually to hold the authority and partners to account and to an offer that they might make. So there are corporate parenting arrangements around the country, but some of them would have their local universities or local colleges as board members as well. So it's really putting that marker down to say that we've received that small c challenge from Mark Riddell to say you should look at your corporate parenting arrangements and consider how you might better serve some of the services and some of the performance that we've talked about earlier on here by perhaps considering those arrangements.
So the meeting, we just went to brief Steve, Chief Exec, and all the other stakeholders within Kirklees around the corporate parenting ask, if you like. What we've agreed to do is to provide a response to Mark's letter in terms of the points that he makes, an action plan, and then we need to have conversations about more broadly, how can we extend the corporate parenting duties and responsibilities much more widely than in its current ownership, and what's the kind of strategic governance arrangements around that, thinking about the corporate parenting principles within the Children and Social Work Act. So we've agreed to attend the executive team with the same PowerPoint, but brief it up if you like. What we need to think about is, because obviously there's the Constitution determines how this corporate parenting board is facilitated, and we know we need to move at pace on this stuff in terms of getting that corporate parenting drive. There's been some proposals that we need to build up really around how do we think about perhaps having because Mark talked about having some themed subgroups to underneath the corporate parenting board. We wondered about whether or not, Steve's suggesting that he chairs an officer meeting underneath this on a temporary arrangement. We bring in wider partnerships and attendance at that meeting, and we drive some of the priority work underneath that, whilst we think about how the corporate parenting board in the future might be facilitated. But we know that we can't change this arrangement at pace really, and we've got quite a lot of work that we need to do, so that might be a meeting that we can invite yourself along to, as well as broaden that out to others. I still think this corporate parenting board itself, however, could still be broadened in terms of representation. You know, Mark did talk about bringing in the ICB, a decision maker from the ICB that can make decisions about children in care and care leavers, police representation, probation, because of the 18 to 25-year-old discussion. So that's kind of where we've got to in terms of the strategic conversations, and then obviously the work around practice will commence on Friday with North Yorkshire.
Thank you very much. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you've mentioned the ICB, police, probation, housing is another one. Adults, although somebody from adults did attend last time, you know, but our young people, particularly our children with disabilities, become young people transitioning to adults, particular concern. And I absolutely am in agreement with that. The other thing is, and I don't know whether, and I suspect we can't alter the makeup of this board before another annual meeting of council. I'm not sure. It really does need to happen sooner rather than later, whether we can alter it or whether it's subgroups in order to facilitate that. And really, I mean, I'm really pleased to see so many people here today. Last time we were struggling to be quorate, all sorts of good reasons why people couldn't be here. But really looking as to whether members of the board who are members of the board can try and make arrangements that somebody substitutes for them if they're unable to come. Because you know, I got to a point where I was trying to count in the chair of children's scrutiny. Happily, we had just enough bodies to be quorate. So I think that's a piece of ongoing work, but quicker, sooner rather than later. And I'll add one thing in, yet again, is about where's the voice of the children and young people at this board. We really need to resolve that. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that point specifically, I've got. I met with the Children in Care Council, which was it is light in number, and it needs to be a broader representative group. But the young people that I spoke to, last night, I told them that they each represented about 100 children in care. I'm meeting with the Care Leavers Council next week, and I've through work with the PAs over the past few weeks, we've swelled that number quite considerably with care experienced young adults that are really interested in putting their views forward and about the services that they still receive, but also they'll have an input about the services that they received before. And just in relation to that specifically, one of the things I'm keen to do for all board members is to make available our total respect training that I'll be working with our children's rights team to develop and make a little bit more nuanced for Kirklees. And deliver the local government association, the LGA pack on corporate parenting, specifically for, there's elements there for elected members around championing roles and roles and responsibilities for corporate parenting, but actually for broader members as well. So those are things that in my, as I come into this role new, that I'm aiming to do quite quickly. And as you say, it does need to be at pace.
Or not new, whether or not it's just everybody all at once and do that training as we relaunch and reset the priorities in Kirklees. It might be quite helpful to do that all with everybody.
Yeah, I absolutely agree about resetting total respect and what have you. Voice of children and young people really, really bothers me. And I have to say I've been asking about this for a year and a half now. And I do feel that early in the new year we should have some sort of cunning plan as to how we're going to do that as such. Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, I think the use of care experienced young adults is a really good idea. But also something I'd heard last week that I thought was quite interesting is the accessibility of the location. And I can't remember which local authority it is, but one corporate parenting board is held in council or in council buildings, and the next one is held in the community, close to where the children are, and then they swap. Kind of, it's a dual location thing. Something to think about. I mean, I don't know whether or not it would work for us, but definitely maybe as well if you've got some of those groups working. Yeah. I think we need to get out there as much as we need to get them in here, if not more.
Which aligns with that place-based working, doesn't it, really, in the principles that we should be reaching out to those that are...
Yeah, thank you for that. I do think that's an interesting idea. The other factor is, of course, the timing of these meetings. Because if you're in school, college or employment, you're not going to be here, are you?
We said that at the meeting we've just been to, and actually one thing you could do is change the time of this meeting. It doesn't have to be in the morning, it could start at 5 o'clock and if we change the structure of this meeting so it's not just about performance but it's about the experience and progress of children in care and care leavers, and think about a different way that we might want to use this particular meeting, I think that's something that we could do.
Yeah, I think that all needs to be in sight. I would welcome even just a list of comments from children and young people who are looked after saying, this is good, this isn't good, just to hear something, you know, anything really. Because at the moment we've had quite a long time facing silence on their voice, and I'm not happy about that. But have you got some sort of time scale or idea how things are going to develop from?
Well, I'm struggling because this is my second week in the role. But what I will commit to is I think that the children and young people's voice should be a standing agenda item on the agenda going forward, and I will own that item and bring young people's voice. I mean, yesterday evening's group gave me a very clear message around how they feel that they want to be celebrated by corporate parents. An annual, they talked about the Oscars and a celebratory arrangement. So I'm easily able to say that I can commit to bringing that in. In terms of bringing young people's voice in here directly, I've done that work in my previous role, and we did exactly what Vicky just said there, which is that we were and also the councillor mentioned there about venue, and we shared venues and evening and alternated evening and daytime meetings on a bi-monthly basis. Sorry, and actually used venues like the local college was a really good venue for some of our care leavers to come to, because actually they could finish and come straight in. So yeah, if we're prepared to be creative in terms of venue and access and timings, then the voice will turn up.
Thank you for that, Joel. Councillor Smith.
I'll be really quick. I agree with you totally about what you said about the voice of young people, but I also think that we probably miss a trick, and I blame myself as much as anybody else for this, about bringing in other councillors' views to, not this board, because I think the structure of this board is probably right with a couple of additions we've discussed, but in general, council meetings and just dissemination of this type of subject material and things, we probably need to remind the other 63, 64 members that they are all corporate parents, and we need to make it a little bit more visible, perhaps.
Absolutely agree with you. I mean, you will have heard me frequently say in full council, you're all corporate parents, and that's great, but I think our colleagues might say, yes, we are. I haven't a clue what to do about that, how they contribute. We were due to have an informal meeting at the end of November, which we've postponed, which was really to talk about how we help our colleagues understand and what they can contribute to corporate parents, and we'll in the new year look to do that again. I think that's an important piece of work.
But if we offer Joel to do that total respect training to all 63 of those councillors, and it's an offer on the table in the early new year, that's the starting point, I think, isn't it, about resetting the expectations, and within that we can start to have the conversations. And then I wonder if we need to have that informal meeting as we think collectively about how we plan how this meeting might be facilitated in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not decrying the total respect training, and I've probably done it at least twice, if not 3 times, but it still, as a ward councillor, doesn't give you any sort of ammunition about what it is you can go and do. It needs examples or people talking about it and thinking about it in order to, whether it's talking to a local business who might have a work experience or an apprenticeship, you know, that sort of thing as well. But I think, yes, we'll do the total respect, but also look to have an informal discussion about how we develop the corporate parenting board. Yes, Councillor Law.
Just thinking as you're speaking there, I know thinking is a very dangerous thing to do, but it is for me anyway. We have a group leader in the room, we have a general business manager in the room. I think there's a space for some kind of representation to group meetings where you have a captive audience rather than build something and hope they will come, which sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. If you've got a captive audience like that, as in a group meeting, then perhaps that can be, I hesitate to use exploited, but I'm going to use the word exploited.
I think that is a very good suggestion, actually, because, you know, all of us go to our group meetings and, oh, he's shaking his head, no, they don't. He's saying, well, no, not everybody. The majority of us go to our group meetings, don't we? And actually asking to have, say, it depends how long the total respect training turns out as such, but to have a slot at each group meeting to present whatever, actually, it is a captive audience, you know, and it will make a take, whereas, you know, you invite somebody to an extra meeting, it will inevitably clash with something, whether it's council business, family work or whatever, so you won't get 100% return. So that is a thought.
Absolutely prepared to be invited to talk about corporate parenting to any forum, and actually slightly different to the total respect training, as you say. I think that there's certainly elements of the LGA toolkit that are really useful, and I've adapted those previously for training purposes, that is co-facilitated, I should say, by children and young people as well alongside me. So I'm happy to arrange that for the new year, certainly.
Okay. Jodie, could you make sure that Joel has the names of each business manager of each of the groups? What do we do about, there's an independent, is it just one independent? Is there more to? But how we do a mop-up with that. Can I ask colleagues, and I know we all need to be doing other things now, are we all happy that we have as an agenda item from the new year onwards the voice of the child, and in the first place it will be Joel, perhaps Vicky or Joe or Kieran telling us what they've been told? Are we all happy with that? Yep. So that will be definitely as an agenda item in the new year as such. can I just say thank you very much for all your attendance and all your contributions. Oh, I'm being reminded we have to look at the agenda plan. And I have to say, I looked at it yesterday, and for January, it just seems just the standard things and a little bit on the bare side. And I put down voice of children and young and care leavers in my list. Is there anything else that anybody feels needs to be included at the next meeting in January? Nothing at the moment off the top of your head. Well, we'll have a think about that, but definitely voice of children looked after and care leavers as an agenda item. And we'll perhaps debate where things are about further development of the board. Perhaps that will be an agenda item in itself. Yep. Thank you very much for your attendance, your contributions. I am most grateful. Thank you.